2022 to order now. If there's any declaration of interest, you may declare at any time. And delegations, we have our first one from Clean Air Partnership, Kevin Behan, Deputy Director. So Kevin, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much.
I apologize if I said your name wrong.
Close enough. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you for having me this afternoon. I'm just going to share my screen, if I may. Okay, so you should be seeing the presentation now.
Yes.
I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the Clean Air Council, what it is, how it all works. I'm going to talk about our declaration and work plan, which we align with each council term. I'll just go through some of the resources available where you can access past meetings, resource the advocacy work we do, and talk about some of the upcoming meetings we have. So the Clean Air Council is a project of Clean Air Partnership. So we are a charity, we're the legal entity. We're a charity, we were registered in 1996, and the Clean Air Council has been active since the year 2000, so approximately 22 years. The reason it all came about was in Southern Ontario in particular at that time, smog was a considerable issue and municipalities were trying to address it in isolation, but there was no mechanism to convene them, bring them together. So that was effectively why we were created, as a convener for municipalities to work on environmental issues. The issue then was smog, and it really has grown into climate change and greenhouse gas reduction. So as I said, we were established 22 years ago, the CAC was. When I say CAC, that's Clean Air Council. It is Canada's largest peer-to-peer municipal climate network. So we connect staff to staff in other municipalities to deal with similar issues. And in doing so, we share everything from legal opinions, RFPs, costs of doing things, research, knowledge transfer. We try to just make it easier for staff to achieve more with limited resources. So there are 35 municipal members right now, representing about 9 million people in Ontario. And those members have collectively completed over 1,000 sustainability initiatives, reduced over 15 million tons of carbon dioxide, and had operational savings of $500 million. And one thing to think about when we talk about the Clean Air Council, we address both the corporate side of the municipality, where the municipal corporation is trying to reduce emissions and act on climate change, and also the community sides, with both sides. As a member, there's member fees. Those are based on your population. So for municipalities less than 50,000, it's about $1,200 a year. For those fees, we then convene workshops. We have about 20 of those per year, around 15 to 20 webinars per year. We produce reports. We provide direct assistance as you're trying to reduce emissions in a bunch of different areas. We do provide that direct connection to other municipal peers as well, and other municipalities. It's great for staff and elected officials to hear from their peers who've done something very similar in another municipality, how it worked, what the pitfalls were, what worked, what didn't, and so on. We also run a collective procurement process where municipalities can come together to purchase either staff or assets. And we also produce bi-weekly newsletters. The Clean Air Council, it is aligned with municipal council terms in Ontario. So we're coming to the end of a Clean Air Council term right now. What we do is when the next council is elected, we reconvene the staff who work within Clean Air Councils, municipalities, and they inform us about what's going on, what are the priorities in the municipality for the upcoming term. Then we create our work plan, which is called our declaration, effectively, based on those priorities, and we work with those over the next 4 years. And so there is a reporting process we go through every year. It's not a strict process in the sense that if joining, you must achieve X, Y, and Z, but we do try to push ambition a little where possible, with an understanding of what's realistic given resources in different parts of the province. The current priorities, so the one for the term that's about to end, were corporate climate action, so reducing municipally created emissions, financial mechanisms for low carbon action, so in particular the use of local improvement charge financing for energy efficiency retrofits on private properties, that came up as key in this term. Reducing building emissions for the community more generally, including commercial, institutional, and other emission sources, as well as transportation emission reduction, and how to integrate climate considerations into municipal decision making. So a lot of municipalities, for example, have declared a climate emergency. We often ask, what's the first thing you do in that situation? So one of the ways we responded to that was we created an online climate lens that is now being used by municipalities across the province and has been used in over 1,000 municipal decisions. So just for your reference, there's a link at the end there to the declaration. You can also link from our website to all of our past meetings. All of our past resources are all available there. So again, that link's just for your reference. And there's a range of other resources are available on our website to help staff and elected officials. There are different communities of practice we establish from time to time. Some of those can last quite long, maybe 5+ years. Some are more for something that's more pressing and immediate. There's quite a few resources on green infrastructure and green development standards on the site right now, as well as a building retrofits collaboration we've been advancing, and an active and sustainable transportation community of practice. So again, these sorts of communities of practice, they're a bit more focused than some of the general climate change reduction work we do, and they do come and go. We also advocate on behalf of our members, our municipal members, to the province on decisions that are before the province. We would convene all of the municipalities, and then we would write submissions to the province on their behalf, advocating for certain elements to be included perhaps in an upcoming provincial policy or plan. So we've done quite a bit of that in the past 4 years on energy decisions, federally on the National Building Code, provincially on the Environment Plan, and on a range of other provincial and federal plans. And so you can see those all at the link below. And provincial staff and federal staff have reported back to us that they really value hearing that from the municipalities, because where there's other organizations that also advocate for municipalities, federally, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, or provincially, AMO, for example, they're less focused on environment and energy. They touch on it, but it's not their core focus. They do like to hear from the Clean Air Council members. And this is the final slide. There's 3 staff with our organization who we act as a bit of a 1-800 number, I suppose, for municipal staff. Whenever they're going through anything, we don't want staff trying to do the research themselves, trying to figure it all out themselves, when we know someone else somewhere has already done the same thing. And so we try to just make it easier, make it smoother for staff to get the information they need to council in a really efficient way. There's a link at the end there to sign on to our mailing list if you'd like to see a little bit more about what we do. And happy to take any questions anyone has. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kevin. Once I can see everybody, perfect. Are there any comments or questions from committee here? Go ahead, Kim.
I just want to say how excited I am to be part of this and to be able to access all of these wonderful resources. It's such a help to be able to start with work that's already been tried and assessed in other places. There's nothing more challenging than looking at a blank piece of paper saying, okay, now where do we go from here? And Ontario is a huge province, and so I'm really, really looking forward to an opportunity to work with you and learn from all of the great initiatives that you've undertaken. So thank you for your presentation today.
Very much.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. So are there any other comments from others on the committee or questions? Councillor McQueen, go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. So, regards to air quality, do you on your website, or is there a place to go, or do you monitor the daily or weekly or yearly air quality throughout the province, or how do you you must have to have a benchmark to sort of see if it's getting better or worse, or how are we doing?
Yeah, we do not provide that on our website, but it is provided. So the province of Ontario, really through agreement with Environment Canada, uses a select number of monitoring stations across Ontario. There's not enough of them. There's not nearly enough of them. They're generally located in regional airports. They have federally, we've got standards that we have to stay within, both in terms of industrial emissions and ambient air quality. We have done quite well in terms of meeting those standards, both provincially and federally, but that is all based on the location of those stations. And I don't know where your closest one is, but I'm going to guess it's not very close to you. And there are local variations that we are not capturing. And so our province and our federal monitoring systems are really not helping us. There are private companies that are trying to address this issue. But those local variations are what are really interesting, because you could have a local pollutant source that is just not captured provincially or federally. So we work together with all the other Clean Air Council members and third parties to advance that sort of monitoring, but it's generally done only on request, and generally there's an RFP required to advance it. So no, we do not host those sorts of information on our website with regard to what the actual achievable standards have been, but I can certainly show you who does host them. And it's all quite accessible, the data, but I would throw in the caveat that it may not be reflective of your exact local circumstance.
Just to follow up with that, you're probably right. I know the air quality here and the escarpment is a lot different than the air quality of downtown Toronto, but which I just witnessed last Saturday night. But I know back, you said when you started 20 years ago, I know there was that big push to eliminate the coal-fired generation, and I think you mentioned that. But a big part of that issue with air quality was what was coming up through the Ohio Valley and coming up in Canada. So I mean, we do our part, but if others around us and they were being affected, has there been changes worldwide in the sense of that as well? Just that here.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct, especially during those hot summer days when Ontario cannot produce enough power for our own communities. We do import from coal-fired plants in the Ohio Valley. There are not as many of those as there once were. We also have been in a bit of a lucky spell in that we haven't had too many heat events that have crossed the whole region,
right?
Where we have experienced that poor air quality. We can't influence what happens south of the border. You know, we can only do our best up here to do what we can, and there's many other reasons why we want to reduce our emissions. In Ontario, removing coal-fired generation has been huge in helping our communities reduce our emissions. The electricity we use is a lot cleaner than it was 10 years ago. We're adding a little more gas to the generation mix now, which is not ideal. That's the sort of thing we can truly control here, and truly control the end emissions from our electricity use. But yeah, to your question, no, I mean, we haven't seen huge emissions increases or air pollution increases because of Ohio Valley coal plants in recent years.
Right. Well, I guess they have they're moving toward a cleaner energy source down there as well. I assume. And I guess the last question will be is in the sense of moving forward in electrification. And you said about natural gas. I guess that's going to be the key thing is coming up with because and this is this is a little bit of our topic in our group here, but is electrification and changes to our to electric cars and all that kind of stuff. But you know, I talk to so many people and so many people say, well, something's going to have to change in the generation part of that to get there. And obviously, you know, maybe that's not as focused on what your group does, but it is something that we're going to have to be very much tuned into and what's coming. And is it hydrogen or however, because, you know, and hydro is certainly a very clean energy itself, but we're just going to need a lot more of it. Right.
Yes. In the current business as usual scenario, Councillor, you're absolutely correct. We would need a lot more of it. But what we also need to do, and this is not the true responsibility of any one municipality, but rather the province and the federal government, is we need programs to make our buildings a lot more efficient, especially our homes. A very difficult nut to crack. When our homes are more efficient, the energy usage in our homes is able to come right down. So we anticipate, both provincially and federally, that as electrification ramps up, as does efficiency, and therefore generation, yes, it more or less will balance out.
Right.
Yeah, there may be requirement for more generation over time, no doubt about it. But efficiency is the cheapest dollar of all, they say, in terms of generation, as opposed to nuclear, gas, or any other source.
We just buy everybody sweaters for Christmas.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you just excuse me for 30 seconds while I close a door to shut this dog barking outside? My apologies. He laid here sleeping on the floor for the last hour, so of course he's alive now when there's a meeting. The only comment I had, if there's no other comments from committee, was in speaking to Linda and Randy this morning, the Clean Air Partnership will be a great resource for staff at county level and at municipal level. But there's also a climate caucus, I understand, for elected officials. And I wonder if you can tell us, Kevin, a little bit about how to access that and how to kind of get the word out there to the rest of our council members.
Yeah, I can share some resources, and I will do after this webinar. So there is a climate caucus. There's a national climate caucus with, I think it's about 650 elected official members nationally. The National Climate Caucus has provincial chapters. For Ontario, we help convene the Ontario chapter. So it's a different animal to the Clean Air Council in that it's purely for elected officials. So the comms materials and so on are a little bit different, but I'm happy to share after the call how you can get more information on the Climate Caucus, and we're happy to connect you all with Alex and the Climate Caucus staff.
Excellent. That would be great. Thank you very much. So if there are no other questions or concerns, unless Linda or Randy, you have anything that you would like to add here?
Not at this time, other than the report, obviously, that we're recommending to this task force and ultimately to council to join the Clean Air Council. We just see huge benefits, as Kim noted, just being part of an overall network of like-minded municipalities. We're all trying to row in the same direction and ultimately try to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, both community-wide and corporately. So to be able to access some of the resources through the Clean Air Council is going to be invaluable for us going forward.
Excellent. And Linda, did you have anything?
It'll be a great organization to be part of, and I'll add that many of our neighboring jurisdictions are already members. So in addition to being able to learn from folks who are maybe a bit distant from us that are innovating, we'll also be able to collaborate more closely with counties of Wellington and Dufferin.
Excellent, great. Tara, do we want to move that item forward on the agenda to make the motion and pass it now?
Sure, that would be great. I can read it if need be.
Yeah, I just managed to go off on a tangent here. I've got it. That report PDR CCTF 24-22 regarding Clean Air Council membership be received, and that Grey County become a member of the Clean Air Council, with membership fees for 2022 being paid through the existing budget. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Warden Hicks and a seconder? Deputy Warden McQueen? Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And thank you very much for your presentation, Kevin. So then we will move on to our next one from Neighborhoods North. So who is speaking, or is everyone?
And I can just introduce the Neighborhoods North group if that is okay with you, Chair Carlton. So thank you to our Neighborhoods North volunteers for joining us. There will be a number of speakers. First up will be Shauna McIver, but I just wanted to start by saying that I've been in conversation with the Neighborhoods North group since last summer, and it's just been such a pleasure to work with them. And what they're going to talk you through in their presentation really forms the backbone and foundation of the staff report that's in front of you today. So I'll let them walk you through their presentation, and then collectively, we're certainly happy to answer any questions with regard to what's being proposed in the report. I'll hand it over to you, Shauna.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting us to present to you. We have what we hope will be a pretty quick presentation full of pictures and photographs, so you don't have to look at too many words. There are 4 of us presenting today. Lloyd Lewis is our leader for Neighborhoods North and the chair. Gord Edwards will be talking. He's the co-chair of Neighborhoods North. Vicki Thompson also doing a little bit of the presentation. She's our master gardener and volunteer. And I'm Shauna McIver, also a volunteer. So there are 3 parts to our presentation. The first part is who are we? Like, who is Neighborhoods North, and do we have any credibility? The second part is the current state of landscaping at Grey County, your administration building. And the third part is a direction for change. So I'm now going to pass over to Gord Edwards, who will talk to you who will introduce you to Neighborhoods North.
So I think you can hear me. We can see the first slide. Who is Neighborhoods North? In the first photo here, you see some members of the team, including Lloyd Lewis, our leader, who is in the center, are busy watering the newly planted healing forest. We are a group of about 50 volunteers, mainly retirees. Our first project was funded by a grant from TD Evergreen and involved planting a row of trees along the Eddie Sargent Boulevard opposite Kelso Beach. We then switched our focus to the 30+ acres of mowed grass at the GBHS. That's the hospital, sorry. Volunteers are seen here in the next slide. Mulching and watering and weeding. The work never ends, but it warms the heart. It puts smiles on people's faces. Trees do that for people. The next slide, when the crab apples are in bloom, everybody feels the joy. There's Lloyd and I featured there. Similarly, the welcoming garden. As staff or visitors or patients pass through or around the welcoming garden on their way from the parking lot to the entrance of the hospital, they feel the joy, they smile, the heart's warm. This was an uninspiring island of mowed grass before Vicki and her team of volunteers transformed it last year. We are also working on a pollinating garden and a wheelchair accessible trail around the helipad. We are busy little bees. Finally, there's one little detail that also helps define us. We are a subcommittee of the Owen Sound Field Naturalists. Neighborhoods North receives cash donations with some regularity Being a committee of the Owen Sound Field Naturalists not only engages us with many like-minded and knowledgeable volunteers, but it also provides us status as a charitable organization. So that's who we are. Thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to this next project. Back to Shauna.
Okay, thanks, Gord. As Gord implied, Neighborhoods North's mission is to educate and lead by example, planting wherever we can get our little hands in the soil in these climate changing times. So the first photo, I'm just going to walk you through 4 photographs. One of them, this is the first one. It's obviously recognizable to you. I want you to just, I'm going to pause here to give you a chance to really look at this landscape, this photograph that is in front of you. I'm going to ask you to think about what your first impression is. If somebody showed you this photograph and said, "Hey, you're going to visit Owen Sound," what would you think? You saw this. And then I'd like to ask you what occurs to you as a member of the Climate Change Task Force. So to us, this looks like a traditional landscaping practice that was once acceptable, but is now outdated given our climate change, the changing climate. There's nothing here to absorb heavy rain or provide shelter from high heat. There are no pollinating plants. Look a little bit closer at this lawn. You see there are no weeds. You can't find any weeds. You can't see any weeds. This means there are weed killers and pesticides being applied to this landscape. There's no life here. There's no life here at all. Certainly no birds, no insects, no small mammals. Even humans wouldn't find it a welcoming place. All right, I'm going to switch to the next slide, which shows the same grassy area, but from the building looking south. And I just want to show you the steepness of the slope on this land. And I'd like to ask you where you think the rain would go in heavy downpours and heavy storms that we're going to get more of. At least that's what the prediction is. The water would run right quickly off this grass and onto the roads and into the intersection and into the storm sewers. Not great. So lots and lots and lots of grass at this place, at this administration building. Turf grass has a long history. You know, it was a valuable idea in its time. It was associated with prosperity. It meant you could afford labor, you could afford pesticides, you could afford people to water, you could afford weed killers. You didn't have to devote the land to growing food or animal husbandry. You were well off. So it was, it had its uses. So strongly have lawns been venerated well, pretty much all over the world, but certainly in Ontario, that until recently, it was illegal in this province in most municipalities to naturalize property. That's worth thinking about. So this last photograph that I'm showing you is the same property, taken from the south entrance to Owen Sound as you're coming into Owen Sound from Guelph, Kitchener, Chatsworth. I'd like to ask you what the first impression of somebody would have coming into Owen Sound. Owen Sound, by the way, prodded by Neighborhoods North, has been declared a tree city of the world. So anyway, just take a look. Now, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Vicki Thompson, who's our master gardener, who will walk you through some alternative and suggestions for healthier planting options for this particular property. Vicki.
Thanks, Shauna, and thank you for having us today and for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm here to talk to you about plants. In my career as a physician, I worked in the field of mental health for many years. It is no surprise to me that we are now seeing the science that shows how closely human health is linked to people's connection to green spaces and to the natural world. Along with our love of lawns that Shauna has described, in our culture, we have looked at plants either as sources of food or just as pretty ornaments for our yards and our parks. But plants can be so much more than just decorations. In a natural ecosystem, each organism, each plant has a role in the maintenance of the health of that system. Our private and public gardens can be connected to those natural ecosystems, and our garden plants can take on those roles and provide those ecosystem services. This is a profound shift in our thinking about our landscapes. Here are a series of examples of plantings that we have suggested. All of these plantings will be beautiful, and that goes without saying. But my question is, what other services will these plants provide? What else will they do for us? So here, our first suggestion is to plant some pollinator flower beds in a couple of locations. The first one here, outside the entrance off 6th Street East. And wouldn't it enhance the entrance to the building? Which do you prefer, the previous slide or this one? Our insect populations are declining rapidly. Flower gardens that are designed to support insects use native plants to provide food and shelter to pollinators and other beneficial insects. And many people are put off by the idea of having insects around. I can reassure you that there are no dangerous insects that will be very interested in these gardens. Birds like them too. These gardens can also help preserve our native plants, which are threatened by climate change. So when we include educational plaques or posters, we can also encourage Grey County residents to do something similar at their homes. It is not difficult, and it really makes a difference to insect populations. The other area we would suggest is an area next to the staff lunch area on the other side of the building. We also suggest some shade trees here near this area to provide some relief from the heat to the staff who use this area to sit or enjoy their lunch. In addition to providing that much needed shade, trees sequester carbon, reduce cooling and heating costs of nearby buildings. They filter the air and they trap pollutants. They provide habitats for birds and insects and small animals. That's a lot of free services. There are already a few trees along the 6th Street East, as you can see. Let's add some more. Perhaps we could add a few native sugar maples. You'll notice that we've mulched the area under the trees, and over time, this area would be planted with small shrubs and other native plants. This will improve the tree's growth and health, and also help insect populations by providing a soft place to fall. As Shauna mentioned, the ground at the corner of 6th Street and 9th Ave gets very wet. As our climate becomes more unstable, we will have more sudden severe downpours. In order to mitigate the flow of stormwater into the sewage system, we suggest a rain garden or other green infrastructure. And I was delighted to hear that the Clean Air Council offers so much support and information about these types of things. A study of water flow in the property would be essential to plan this properly. But then we can plant water-tolerant native plants and shrubs in the site, which will contribute to biodiversity, filter and reduce the flow of water, support native insects and birds, and again, offer an opportunity to educate visitors about the importance of stormwater management and managing those severe downpours that we are going to see more of. This is beautiful, and it's doing an important job. We are so fortunate that this administration building is so close to our natural forest. How about linking up to it? We could extend a forest habitat in the northeast section of the property. This is the biggest planting project we have suggested, and it includes densely planted native trees, plants, and shrubs, supporting, and perhaps more importantly, demonstrating the importance of our forest environment in mitigating climate change. And it would be gorgeous in the winter. We hope that you will consider these options and others and take action and just try one or two of these, see how it goes, and over time, make the grounds of the Grey County Admin Building a model for a new, healthier way of landscaping. Thanks. Back to you, Shauna.
Thank you. So I'm just going to put a quick slide that shows logos of the various organizations we've been involved with, because Neighborhoods North, we are really big fans of collaboration. We've discovered that that's what works. It's what has to happen. I'm going to pass the presentation over now to Lloyd, our leader, who will just quickly outline how we see Neighborhoods' possible role in a project on Grey County. Admin building, I mean.
Thanks, Shauna. Good afternoon, everybody. Shauna just mentioned about collaboration, and that has been the key at the hospital for us. And so we have fingers in the pulse of a number of different organizations, and we would love to assist you with that, the collaboration, because you know and we know that you need that, but you also need to be seen doing that as well. And so that is very important, such as the local climate action teams that are around this area. We would love to assist in any designs, and we've already suggested to you a few ideas, and we would like to keep our hand in on that if possible. All of this work requires a labor, and who's going to do it? So we have a number of people, volunteers, who would love to come and have a planting bee. And so we can help assist with that, and it would be our pleasure. However, at this point, we have to say that we would not be able to do long-term maintenance because we're so involved at the hospital. And so that would be something you need to strongly consider. Where's the money coming from? Well, we have had success at writing grants in the past 4 or 5 years, and we could assist you with that. For example, Sean has already written up a grant for the Lake Huron Forever, and it's ready to go. And if should you want to use that, we have connections with Community Foundation and TD Friends of the Environment as well. So those are a few areas that we can assist you with, and it would be our pleasure. Your role is massive, of course, as the climate task force, and that is to convince the council as a whole how to make Grey County greener and healthier and safer. But it's an exciting role, and we're excited for you. And we, as already mentioned, we suggest you start small, the low-hanging fruit, what is visible, but also what has the greatest impact on climate change itself. So that's what we hope for you. And we hope that our enthusiasm is infectious, and that you can act boldly and set that wonderful example for the whole county. So I'd like to conclude, pass back to Shauna, and she'll just give you a few contacts. Thank you for listening.
Okay, we're done. This is the last slide. It just shows some contacts, some contact information for you. You know, we're asking you as members of the county's climate change task force to do your part, starting with this symbolic landscape that you have the ability to make change on. It's symbolic because it's the headquarters for Grey County. So whatever you do there acts, you know, will influence other properties. And we know that Grey County owns and manages quite a lot of property in the county. So this might be a good way to start. We're asking you to model the kind of landscaping that will have to become the norm. It will have to become the norm because our climate is changing so rapidly, and we'll have to preserve this delicate ecosystem that is Grey County, this wonderful, wonderful ecosystem that we've got. So we know we're in a climate emergency. You've already declared that publicly. It's scary, you know. I mean, it certainly keeps all of us awake at night. We have to do our bit and hope the needed change won't be too late or too slow. Any questions? Feel free.
Thank you, Shauna and Vicki and Gordon Lloyd, for your presentation. I have always looked at that piece of land and thought something needed to be done rather than just cut grass. So I actually had an idea this morning in talking to Linda and Randy about maybe we need some trails going through there, and maybe we could call it the Warden's Walk and have a memorial garden to previous wardens, and maybe the wardens would help pay for the tree in their name. So we might get some of our funding there since we have current and former or past board with us. That's just an idea I had. I would love to see walking trails going through there with some benches, some seating areas and such. And I think all that could incorporate. I did have a question that I'll ask now, and then I'll go to the rest of committee about that planting that's suggested for 2024. Do you know what you have in mind for planting then? Are you looking at things like birch trees that I think of as a native tree and that type of thing? Or what is the consideration there? And I guess further to that, is the consideration for all of this to be native plants?
You know what, I'll let Vicky address the native plant question. Vicky.
Thank you for that question. I feel quite strongly that we should focus on native plants. There are situations where native plants don't do very well because we've created very unnatural environments. For example, in our welcoming garden at the hospital, we couldn't use native trees. We couldn't find one that could tolerate the conditions that are in that particular site. But aside from very rare exceptions like that, I would think it would be very important to use native plants and trees because of the close relationships between our native insects, birds, with these native species. They've evolved for generations, thousands of years with these plants, and they need them to survive. So I would feel quite strongly about that, given the occasional need for adaptation around these weird and unusual man-made sites that we've created.
Thank you.
Sue, you said something about 2024. I'm not sure what you were referring to there.
I think there was something in the literature that came out today that maybe on a map or something that showed going forward suggestion for 2024. And I'm not sure I can get to that and find it right now. Tara, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, if I could suggest, there's a staff report on this as well. So maybe if I could suggest getting a mover and seconder for the staff report, and then staff can present information in addition to the delegation. And there might be some further questions answered in that report as well.
Thank you, Tara. Okay, so could I have a mover and seconder on that staff report then, please? Deputy Warden McQueen and Councillor Hutchison. So I'll turn it over to staff then to carry forward.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. So the 2024 planting you allude to is what's outlined in that staff report. And there are significant similarities between the staff recommended planting program and the delegation presentation you just saw. I tried to assure Neighborhoods North that they would get full credit for all of the great work and thinking they did in putting forward a preliminary proposal. And I think it's a fantastic example of that kind of collaboration that Shauna spoke to. So just briefly, I don't have a presentation, but speaking to the report, we did meet with the Neighborhoods North group last year in the summer. And then in the fall, we actually did a site walk around the county administration building, both with Neighborhoods North volunteers, also with Mike Fry from Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, and also with our housing and maintenance manager of the site. So we really wanted to make sure that whatever proposal was put forward took into account all of those factors. So the great local expertise of Neighborhoods North, the sort of tree and site specific expertise from Grey Sauble Conservation Authority to kind of answer some of those questions about native trees and what the site was appropriate for in terms of planting. And then of course, ensuring that the maintenance of those trees and things like utilities and all of those were also thought about in what was put forward, making sure that we weren't going to be putting anything in the ground that would create maintenance issues. And so what we've proposed, it ties very closely to Going Green and Gray, the recently adopted climate change action plan. It advances two actions in particular. So action one of that plan is around afforestation and habitat and biodiversity protection. So I think there's a really clear linkage there that this is a good first step. And then the second action that we hope that this project can advance is around Action 19, which is a climate action engagement program. So, you know, we're realistic in knowing that the scale of planting we can achieve on the county administration building site is really about that leadership. It's not a huge site. We're not going to get the 1 million trees that council has set as a target by 2030 planted just on Grey County owned property. But we do think it's a great opportunity to work more closely and engage the community. And particularly one of the things that's outlined in the staff report are efforts we're making to look at ways that naturalization projects can also advance reconciliation. So we know that right relationship with the landscape is very closely, is really the leadership in that area comes from our Indigenous communities and neighbors. And so we've been in conversation specifically with Mawikwadong Indigenous Friendship Center to try and understand what would be the appropriate way to move forward with these kind of naturalization projects, thinking about reconciliation and thinking about Indigenous leadership. So we hope that this planting project is almost a pilot where we can look both at community engagement, getting residents involved, getting them out to the site, getting them be part of the planting, and then also thinking through what this can look like as something that hopefully can also move us forward with reconciliation. I have one thing I'll share my screen to show you. So I hope it was sort of quite deep into the staff report, but our GIS team put together a fantastic 3D rendering of what the site could look like if we follow through with this planting project. And there's really, there's lots of things to explore, but there's one thing I'd like to show you because I thought it was quite powerful. So this is our site at the moment. You can see the existing trees. And if we just talk about phase 1, which is what we're proposing for 2022, you see those 10 sugar maples, albeit a few years down the road when they've reached their mature size. And you also see a number 4 shade trees over close to the building. But the thing that I think is really powerful is there's a feature in here where you can actually turn on, you can turn on shadows. So you can actually go in here and turn on the shadows. And what you can see is that at midday in March, you actually have full shade all along that walkway. And that's the walkway that many of our social service clients use if they're walking up to the building. So they're going to experience that shade as they come into the building. As you move through the months, it's a bit less shady by the time you get into sort of July and August. But you see that in August, you still have significant shading. And if you look sort of from, let's say, 9:45 in the morning when it can start to be getting pretty warm, you have that shading of the sidewalk all the way through till kind of 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I just think when you think about the microclimate and the benefits of trees, this is a really great illustration. I won't make you seasick, but I will just add in phase 2 planting, which is what's proposed for 2023, which is that bioretention rain garden, as well as, you can see the pollinator garden just kind of tucked in, and then that larger planting, which is proposed for 2024. And I did go back and check, and you can actually see, Chair Carlton, that there are a handful of birch trees that are part of that proposed planting. But I think the thing I'd like to emphasize is that the selection of trees will happen in close conversation with Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, and also, of course, seeking any expertise or input from the Neighborhoods North group. So it's certainly not finalized. So I'll stop sharing my screen there. And I think the only other thing to add on the staff report is that we are proposing that the 2022 plantings, the budget for that can be absorbed within the existing Climate Action Implementation Fund, and that any expenses incurred in future years would be considered as part of the budget process.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from committee members? Go ahead, Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. It's exciting. As a full-time farmer, and I planted a number of trees for windbreaks around buildings and stuff like that. They actually do, they're multi-purpose in the sense of shade, wind, sanctuary for birds, and a lot of different things. The one thing you always got to remember, small trees get to be big trees. And you have to make sure that you plan ahead, because they do get big, and if you're too close to a building or they're too close to something, or hydro wires, I think it's nothing worse than having to, you see trees along hydro lines where it pretty well is the fate of the tree when you start cutting half the tree apart. So I think that's, one thing you need to, certainly think about there. And certainly I like your idea, Madam Chair, in the sense of a walkway. I think you could create opportunities, have benches and walkways, and maybe I like the idea of the blossom trees, and maybe you could have a fruit grove, a grove of fruit trees that wouldn't it be nice to go out and Kim grab her plum off the tree and she could have her plums. Let me get a smile there. Anyway, it's there's so many different things that you can, I'm not sure what the climate for Owen Sound is for fruit trees, but I know that there are probably varieties that do, fit that climate, and if it changes and stuff like that. I know of one example a number of years back. There was an application, I'm going to say back about 10 years ago, for a complete clearing of about 10 acres of forest, maple forest, and it was on a slope. And the neighboring property owner said, "You're creating a problem here." And anyway, it was granted. And a few years later, there was a flood on his property, because it's interesting how trees, not only, I guess, from the precipitation that comes down slows it, but also there must be an absorption rate in the roots and stuff. But once those trees were gone, it created a huge problem that was predictable and preventable to gain 10 acres of workable land. And I'm a farmer, and I know we need fallow land, but it just didn't make sense and there was an example that sort of stuck in my mind of something that could have been prevented. So a part of the 4 or 5 inches of rain in an hour, do need to be dealt with. And we see that, we've seen that sort of thing. So yeah, this is exciting. I know at one time there was some plantation in front of that sign. There was, when the rendering that was done, there was some I don't know, native grasses, and there was some stuff there and some rocks, but I think some of that stuff got removed, and I guess maybe it's easier to cut grass with less obstacles in the road, and I can see that part as well. But yeah, certainly finding that balance. I think that would be, but remember, trees get big. So yeah, but there's probably type of trees that also, are a little bit more dwarf type, or, on that side, you want to keep the views of the building to a certain degree in the sign, that shows where it is. And you don't want a situation where people go to Owen Sound and go, "Where's that building? All I see is a forest."
That'll be okay.
Maybe not a bad thing either, right? I mean, but yeah, that's maybe my kids' generation or my grandkids' generation. Maybe if that happens, it does take time, but certainly trees do add a lot of shade, a lot of wind, a lot of perspective, a lot of different wildlife, bird life. There's so many aspects of that. So I certainly witness that from my farming and what I see around the farm and stuff like that. So I certainly, it's refreshing to see an idea. I sort of think, I don't know if you have designed it completely, but I think a rendition or something that's unique. Something, I don't know if there's an award or something that you could, something. I think we have an opportunity to make something here. Is there something that could be done that would signify our where we want to go as the county of Grey, but is recognized by something unique and something, and certainly, you guys and others are the expert on how you could just develop or create something unique moving forward, and you say, hey, see. And I think it's an educational part as well, and for our kids and to see that type of thing. And so yeah, I just throw those few ideas, but I'm certainly excited about your ideas of your thoughts, and yeah, good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ward Hicks.
Gonna say you were muted. So, well, I'm lost for words here, and that's surprising for me. But I'm just blown away with what I see here, and like the deputy warden, I too am very excited by what I see. So I want to thank Vicky and Shauna and Lloyd and Gord for being here today. And folks like you have such vision that I do not, because I have to admit, I've often looked out that window and thought, oh, it looks great. It looks pretty darn good, right? But when you see your presentation, you just realize, my God, so much more is possible. And I take the town of Hanover as an example in that Heritage Square. If you're familiar with the Heritage Square in Hanover, and the people who put that together and had the vision, and all these years later, they must have imagined that it would look like that, because it looks like it looks just perfect. So somebody had to have the sense that over 20 or 30 years, it was going to grow up and look like it does today, just gorgeous. And I think I'm excited for a similar vision for our administration building. I love everything I see. I love the fact that it's going to be staged. I love the fact that we can afford to do phase one without any major impact on budget this year. We always have to think about budget, sadly. And maybe even ideas like a bench or some benches, so that people might feel invited to actually come to the administrative building, and maybe bring their child and hang out and have a picnic on the the grasses and amongst the trees. So thank you for this. I'm invigorated. I'm excited, and you folks have done an awesome job of inspiring us. And I'm sure that when the rest of council sees this, they too will be equally excited and supportive. So thanks again.
Great.
Thank you. I think another aspect of it that I think of is having a walking trail there for staff to go out. You're taking a break, you're having a tough time at work, go take a break, go walk around and get some perspective on things in a nice, gentle fashion. Any other comments from committee? If not, I will call the question. All in favor? Excellent. Carried. And thank you.
Just a quick question, Madam Chair, before our guest leaves.
Go ahead.
I've just wondered, could it be to an interpretive center as well with the type of trees that are, is there a little story behind what you plant? And I think you mentioned, or others mentioned as well, is there some learnings from the Indigenous side of that type of thing? And we do have groups in Grey County that could maybe add a little bit as well, because it's all about learning. And I mean, we've had a tough go with the elm tree here in Ontario, but it would be good if there's an ability, and the ash, it's being attacked, and even some of the maples and the different types of maples. And I don't know if there was eventually a bit of a grove where maybe some of them could be tapped and maple syrup could be made, and I don't know, like there's a lot of different things that maybe that's beyond but I think it's an opportunity to and even as you said, maybe ourselves as wardens or past wardens, that's sort of something that's there's so many different possibilities. I think that is an educational part, and part of your walking path, as the warden said and others have said, there's an educational part, and maybe there's some historical parts, some historical plaques about the history of Grey County, and and maybe you go on a history walk on that. Maybe there's so many things that you could create. I think that we just have everybody will be coming to the hill.
Yeah.
I mean, it's and we also have the courthouse next door, and you see some pretty sad faces in and out of that building, and maybe there's opportunities there for just to take things off your mind and go for a walk and get rejuvenated, and who knows? I mean, you talk about mental health and so much on that part as well. And when you said it, Madam Chair, in the sense of taking time to get a breath of fresh air, and, you know, trees and plants do create oxygen, right? So.
Gord, did you have another comment to make? Go ahead.
Well, we have developed a relationship with the museum, the Railroad Museum, and they are wanting to donate a piece to us called a Huff Duff. And it'll be a historical reference to the Marine Hospital and the Marine, the fact that Owen Sound was such a Marine city. And yeah, so those opportunities are for sure available. And there's many. We also have a relationship with the woodworking group in town who want to build benches, and it just goes on and on and on. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Are there any other comments from staff or anyone? Then let me thank all of you for presenting today. I think we've got some awesome ideas and some excellent things to look forward to in the future, and we look forward to working with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Does that mean the dandelions can grow free now?
Absolutely.
They do on my lawn.
You can make wine, Paul.
I've heard